Hollywood loved to paint its leading ladies as untouchable goddesses, draped in diamonds and flashing those camera-ready smiles. But behind the glitter, some actresses weren't just mingling with directors or producers. They were sitting in the back rooms of smoky clubs, whispering with men whose money and power didn't exactly come from movie contracts. Ever wonder which of Hollywood's most glamorous faces doubled as companions to the underworld? Stay tuned, because the answers may shock you, and a few names will make you look twice. Jean Harlow. She was the platinum blonde that defined the 1,930 seconds, a woman whose icy look and sizzling charisma made her Hollywood's first true bombshell. But Jean Harlow's life wasn't as polished as her screen image. Off-screen, she was caught in a swirl of rumors about powerful men who didn't exactly live by the law. One of the most talked-about connections was through her second husband, MGM executive Paul Byrne. When Byrne died under mysterious circumstances, whispers started flying. Some suggested it wasn't just tragedy, but that Hollywood's mob-backed financiers might have had reasons to keep secrets buried. For Harlow, the headlines were relentless. Her name kept turning up in stories that linked her to mob-financed parties and shady deals hiding beneath Tinseltown's glossy surface. What made Harlow stand out wasn't only her talent on screen, but her ability to straddle two worlds, the polished silver screen and the smoky edges of nightlife where mobsters ruled the tables. She never confirmed the rumors, and MGM worked hard to bury them, but that only made the speculation louder. Jean Harlow may have been marketed as the girl with platinum hair, but in the gossip columns, she was painted as someone much closer to the underworld than her studio wanted anyone to believe. It's the kind of double life that keeps her legend alive. Harlow was Hollywood royalty, but to many, she was also the first blonde starlet whispered about as a gangster's moll. Lana Turner. Few actresses lived a life as dramatic off-screen as Lana Turner. The woman who made hearts race in The Postman Always Rings Twice also lived a private life that could have been pulled straight from a noir script. At the center of it all was her relationship with Johnny Stompanato, a man who looked every bit the Hollywood suitor but whose background was firmly tied to underworld figures. Turner's name was splashed across every newspaper when Stompanato met his end after an altercation inside her home. The studios spun into damage control, but the public already saw Turner as more than just a glamorous starlet. She had become the face of the gangster's girlfriend, a role she didn't choose but one that stuck to her reputation for years. What's wild is how her career survived. Instead of fading away, Turner leaned into the drama. Her films in the late 1,950 seconds and early 60 seconds, often melodramas filled with betrayal and passion, almost mirrored her off-screen chaos. Audiences were fascinated. They didn't just buy tickets for her performances. They bought into the legend of Lana Turner, the beautiful actress who couldn't escape dangerous love. She was still glamorous, still box office gold, but forever marked by that image of a woman caught in the pull of mob ties. Turner's story is a classic reminder that in Hollywood, sometimes the most memorable roles aren't played on the big screen, they're lived in the headlines. Virginia Hill. Unlike many actresses who were whispered about, Virginia Hill didn't just flirt with the lifestyle, she lived it. A fiery redhead who could light up a room, Hill was more than just Bugsy Siegel's girlfriend. She was deeply embedded in the network itself, working as a courier and companion in a world where Hollywood glamour and mob money often overlapped. Hill started as a bit player, drifting into show business through charm and ambition. But she quickly realized her greatest stage wasn't in front of the camera, but in the smoky backrooms where power was traded. With Siegel, she wasn't just a starlet arm candy, she became a trusted partner. When Siegel launched his vision of Las Vegas with the Flamingo Hotel, Hill was right there, mixing with stars, politicians, and mob backers. Her Hollywood appearances were few, but her reputation was legendary. Actresses played malls on screen, but Virginia Hill blurred the line between reality and performance. She was part of the high society gossip columns, always photographed in fur coats and diamonds, yet insiders knew those luxuries came from her ties to men who didn't answer to the studios. For many, Hill embodied the very definition of a moll. Glamorous, untouchable, but also dangerous by association. And unlike others on this list, she seemed to thrive in that role. Virginia Hill wasn't pretending to be part of the underworld. She was its queen, and Hollywood couldn't look away. Barbara Payton. Barbara Payton was supposed to be Hollywood's next great siren. With her piercing eyes and bold presence, she lit up films like Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye alongside James Cagney. But instead of climbing to stardom, her personal life pulled her into a spiral that tabloids couldn't get enough of. Payton's choices in men were headline fuel. She was linked to tough actors who themselves had underworld friends, and then came her entanglement with Tom Neal and Franchot Tone. Their public brawl over her wasn't just Hollywood gossip. It was the kind of chaotic drama that connected her name to dangerous company. To studios, she quickly became too risky, and the big roles dried up almost overnight. What's striking is how fast Payton fell. In just a few years, she went from starring with A-listers to being shunned by the industry. Much of it came from the perception that she wasn't just a starlet with poor taste in men, she was too close to figures that frightened the strang Hollywood establishment. Barbara Payton became the cautionary tale of a rising actress who let her personal life outshine her career. She had the looks, the talent, and the opportunity, but by stepping into the wrong spotlight, she ended up remembered less as a star and more as one of Hollywood's most infamous molls, Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner was the very picture of Hollywood glamour. She was the woman men crossed oceans for and the woman other actresses envied. But while her marriages and romances made headlines, what raised eyebrows were her connections that seemed to brush too close to the mob world. Through her high-profile relationship with Frank Sinatra, Gardner found herself at the center of whispers about Sinatra's own uneasy ties with underworld figures. Sinatra was known for his fiery temper and powerful friends, and Gardner, glamorous, outspoken, and unapologetically independent, was right there beside him. Some insiders claimed she attended parties where the guest list looked less like Hollywood royalty and more like a mobster's roll call. Gardner herself wasn't accused of wrongdoing, but proximity was enough. The public imagination did the rest. To her fans, she was more than just an actress. She was the kind of woman who could walk into any room, no matter how dangerous, and own it completely. That aura only added to her mystique. What's fascinating is how Gardner turned that dangerous edge into part of her legacy. On screen, she was sultry, untouchable, and magnetic. Off screen, she carried that same energy, making her both admired and feared. Ava Gardner wasn't just a star, she was a legend, and her rumored mob ties only deepened the myth. Marie McDonald, the body. Marie McDonald earned her nickname from the press long before she earned respect as an actress. Dubbed the body for her statuesque figure, she quickly became one of Hollywood's most photographed women of the 1,940 seconds and 50 seconds. But while her beauty turned heads in front of the camera, it also drew the attention of men whose power didn't come from studio contracts. McDonald's personal life became a revolving door of high-profile romances, many of which linked her to men with serious underworld reputations. Her love life filled gossip columns as much as her movies did, and it wasn't long before the line between Hollywood star and gangster's girlfriend blurred. Some stories even suggested her career was boosted by powerful figures behind the scenes who weren't exactly producers or directors. What made McDonald's story stand out was how unapologetically she leaned into her image. She wasn't trying to be the girl next door. She wanted to be the glamorous star who lived larger than life, even if it meant attracting the wrong kind of attention. Studios may have marketed her as a pinup, but the public increasingly saw her as someone living in the orbit of men who made Hollywood nervous. Her acting career never matched the drama of her personal life, and in many ways, her legend grew more from the gossip pages than the big screen. Marie McDonald is remembered less for her film roles and more for her reputation as one of Hollywood's most photographed, most glamorous, and most notorious moles. Peggy Hopkins Joyce. If there was ever a woman who lived for headlines, it was Peggy Hopkins Joyce. A Ziegfeld Follies dancer turned actress. Joyce became the prototype of the "it girl" before Hollywood even had the term. She wasn't just famous for her looks, she was infamous for her romances. Joyce's string of wealthy husbands and lovers filled newspapers for decades, but tucked among the millionaires and high society names were men tied to mob fortunes. She wore the jewels, lived in the mansions, and showed up at parties where everyone pretended not to notice who was paying the bills. In many ways, she became the ultimate trophy. Glamorous, daring, and unbothered by where the money came from. Her film career was short, and not especially memorable. But Joyce never needed Hollywood to stay famous. She lived her life as if it were a headline, and the public couldn't get enough. Every diamond necklace or exotic fur coat carried a story, and often, that story involved men whose reputations were far more dangerous than romantic. Joyce represented a new kind of star, one who didn't wait for the studios to promote her. She promoted herself through scandal, gossip, and sheer audacity. By the time Hollywood lost interest in her movies, her reputation as a real-life gangster's moll had already made her a household name. Gloria Vanderbilt. Long before she became a fashion icon, Gloria Vanderbilt flirted with the idea of acting. As a teenager in the 1930 Seconds, she was already one of America's most photographed socialites, thanks to her family fortune, and the infamous custody battle that made national headlines. But what often got buried beneath her society girl image were the rumors about her youthful ties to figures whose wealth came from much darker places. As Vanderbilt grew into adulthood, she mingled in circles that weren't limited to debutante balls and Broadway parties. Some of her early companions included men with mob money behind their fortunes, sparking whispers that the heiress-turned-actress was living dangerously close to the edge. It didn't help that she cultivated a reputation for being bold, modern, and uninterested in playing the demure society lady. Her acting career never truly took off. She appeared in stage productions and dabbled in Hollywood, but she was better known for her name and her romances than for her performances. Still, her early years left behind a trail of gossip tying her to mob-backed playboys and power brokers. While Vanderbilt ultimately reinvented herself as a designer and businesswoman, those early years in Hollywood kept her linked to the kind of stories that blurred the line between glamour and danger. For a time, Gloria Vanderbilt wasn't just the poor little rich girl. She was whispered about as yet another debutante who doubled as a moll. Clara Bow. Clara Bow was the original it girl, the flapper spirit captured in one woman. She was wild, magnetic, and the face of 1920 Seconds Hollywood. But behind the bright smile and that rebellious bob haircut, Bow's life off-screen was chaotic, filled with rumors of connections to men who weren't exactly studio gentlemen. Bow grew up in poverty and carried that hunger for attention into her Hollywood career. As she skyrocketed to fame, her off-screen adventures made as many headlines as her movies. She loved nightlife, wild parties, and running with crowds that weren't always on the studio's approved guest list. In the gossip columns, whispers of mob-backed financiers funding her Hollywood escapades became part of the story. The studios did everything they could to protect their golden girl, but the rumors never quite faded. Bow didn't help her own case. Her blunt personality and refusal to play the polished Hollywood star fed into the myth that she was closer to the underworld than anyone wanted to admit. Clara Bow's career faded by the early 1930 Seconds, but her legend never did. To this day, she remains an icon of the jazz age, remembered not just for her films but for the unfiltered lifestyle that tied her name to mob money and late-night parties. She may have been the it girl, but to many, she was also Hollywood's first true gangster's moll, Marie Windsor. If you've ever watched a noir film, chances are you've seen Marie Windsor. Known as the Queen of the Bees, Windsor made a career out of playing the tough, sultry women who always seemed to be one step away from trouble. On screen, she perfected the role of the gangster's moll. Off-screen, her reputation wasn't so far removed from her characters. Windsor's social life often overlapped with men who were more connected to mob bankrolls than studio payrolls. She attended the parties, rubbed elbows with gamblers, and became known as a woman who didn't shy away from living on the edge. Directors loved her because she brought authenticity to her roles. She didn't just act like a moll, she carried the aura of someone who had lived it. Unlike some of her peers, Windsor never became a headline scandal. She walked the line carefully, balancing her film career with a personal life that kept her linked to the kind of men Hollywood pretended didn't exist. But the whispers followed her. For audiences, that made her performances electric. Watching Windsor on screen felt real, because it was fueled by an off-screen life that already danced in the shadows. Marie Windsor never achieved A-list stardom, but in many ways, she didn't need to. She carved out her own legend as both Hollywood's noir queen and one of the actresses most convincingly, and perhaps authentically, tied to the world of gangster moles. Virginia Mayo. Virginia Mayo was one of the brightest stars of the 1940 seconds, celebrated for her performances in classics like White Heat and The Best Years of Our Lives. On screen, she played everything from the sweet girl next door to the femme fatale who drove men to ruin. Off-screen, it was the latter role that seemed to follow her. Mayo's Hollywood social life often drew whispers about her associations with gamblers and figures rumored to have underworld connections. While she wasn't directly linked to scandal, her close friendships and choice of companions kept her name floating in the same conversations as mob-backed nightlife. This was the era when nightclubs doubled as power hubs, and Mayo, with her charm and looks, was always on the guest list. The irony is that she never needed the association. Her talent alone could carry her career. Yet, Hollywood insiders like to note how comfortably she fit into roles as gangster molls on screen. It added an edge of realism, as if Mayo was channeling a life that wasn't entirely separate from her own. Virginia Mayo's story is less about downfall and more about reputation. She stayed successful, kept her name strong, and remained respected in the industry. Still, her legacy carries the shadow of those whispers. The idea that behind the perfect blonde curls was a woman who knew the underworld a little too well. June Lang. June Lang's story is one of Hollywood's sharpest warnings about choosing love over career. In the 1930 seconds, she was a rising star at 20th Century Fox, appearing in films alongside Shirley Temple and starring in pictures that put her on the brink of real stardom. Then she married Johnny Roselli, a man whose name was whispered with respect and fear in equal measure. Roselli wasn't just any suitor, he was a mob figure with influence stretching from Hollywood to Las Vegas. For Fox, this was a disaster. Studios were obsessed with image, and the idea of their starlet being married to a mobster was unacceptable. Practically, overnight, Lang's career collapsed. Roles dried up, contracts disappeared, and her once promising future turned into obscurity. Lang's marriage didn't last, but the damage was permanent. Hollywood never fully forgave her, and she spent the rest of her career in minor roles, her big break lost forever. What's especially striking is how direct the cause was. Unlike other actresses whose reputations were built on rumors, Lang's career was torpedoed simply because she chose the wrong man. June Lang should have been remembered as a leading lady of the 1930 seconds. Instead, she is remembered as the actress who sacrificed everything by stepping too close to the mob world, Joan Blondell. Joan Blondell was one of Warner Brothers' most beloved stars, lighting up the 1930 seconds with her sparkling humor and quick wit. She was the wisecracking blonde who could steal a scene with a single line, and audiences adored her. But while Blondell was squeaky clean on screen, off-screen she was rumored to mingle with men whose business dealings weren't always legitimate. Hollywood in the Depression era was heavily bankrolled by mob money, nightclubs, casinos, even some studio investments. Blondell, with her approachable charm, fit perfectly into that world. She attended the parties, laughed with the power players, and earned a reputation for being connected to gamblers and financiers who had one foot in Hollywood and one foot in the underworld. Unlike some contemporaries, Blondell's career didn't collapse because of it. She was too talented, too popular, and too smart to let gossip ruin her. But the stories followed her for years, painting her as someone who knew how to play the game off-screen as well as she did on-screen. Blondell's story shows a different side of the gangster mole archetype. She wasn't destroyed by it. If anything, she used the association to give her roles more credibility. When Joan Blondell played the sassy blonde in smoky nightclubs, audiences believed it, because in a way, she had already lived it. Anita Page. Anita Page was MGM's golden girl of the late silent era, hailed as the girl with the most beautiful face in Hollywood. She starred in The Broadway Melody, one of MGM's early talkie hits, and for a moment, she seemed destined to join the ranks of Garbo and Crawford. But behind the polished studio image, whispers followed her about mob connections. During Prohibition, Hollywood's parties were funded by bootleggers, and Anita Page was often said to have caught the eye of some of these power players. She received extravagant gifts and invitations that didn't always come from studio executives. For the gossip-hungry press, this was irresistible, an MGM darling receiving attention from figures who moved in very different circles. Page denied the rumors, but her career slowed by the mid-1930s. Studios turned to new faces, and she faded from the spotlight, her legacy tinged with the mystery of whether the whispers were true. What's fascinating about Anita Page's story is how much of it was projection. Fans wanted to believe that the beautiful starlet wasn't just a movie fantasy, but also the kind of woman gangsters would risk it all to court. Whether or not the tales were exaggerated, the association cemented her reputation as one of Hollywood's most talked-about molls. Virginia Rappe. Virginia Rappe is best remembered for the tragic party incident that ended silent comedian Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle's career. But before that, she was already entangled in Hollywood's underworld connections. As a young model and actress in the late 1910 seconds and early 1920 seconds, Rappe's path often crossed with men who financed silent films with mob money. She attended the parties, wore the gifts, and played the role of a glamorous companion to wealthy backers. These weren't studio heads or directors, they were businessmen whose fortunes came from bootlegging and gambling. In the buzzing, Prohibition-era Los Angeles, Rappe was part of the crowd where Hollywood and the mob blended seamlessly. Her death overshadowed everything else, but her earlier reputation as a woman who lived in the orbit of gangland figures remains part of her story. While Arbuckle's scandal consumed headlines, the whispers about Rappe's lifestyle never completely vanished. Virginia Rappe's tale is one of the earliest examples of how Hollywood starlets could be drawn into the allure of gangster life. She was beautiful, ambitious, and unafraid to live fast, and it left her forever remembered not just as a victim, but as one of Hollywood's first molls. So there you have it, 15 actresses who blurred the line between Hollywood's spotlight and the underworld's shadows. From platinum blondes like Jean Harlow to noir queens like Marie Windsor, these women remind us that fame didn't exist in a vacuum. Glamour came with a price, and sometimes that price was being forever linked to men whose power stretched far beyond the studio gates. Which story caught you most off guard? Drop your thoughts below, hit like, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood legends.